Good afternoon. When I prepared my speech this Thursday, I had a beautiful PowerPoint, but then I realized you are architects. And architects always disagree with the pictures of other people. So I tell you a story so that you can make your picture yourself, because then you will keep it that way. We are at the last weekend of our very successful European Capital of Culture year. So a small thing about tonight, you have perhaps time. Please go to the square where the Leaning Tower is. It is leaning a bit more than the Tower of Pisa. If you ask in the city and you cannot find it, everybody will show you the way. There is a glass house on the square, and there you can find information of what you can experience this evening in the city. There is the light festival, then there's a music festival, and tomorrow we have the official closing ceremony. Welcome in Leeuwarden, welcome in Friesland. The first mentioning of this area was 100 years after the birth of Christ, and it was mentioned by the Romans as an area where barbarians lived in an area unsuitable to live, and they called it Frisia. So the history of this region is much longer than the history of the Netherlands. And although and in the shadow of the Roman Empire, a culture evolved here, which had villages from Denmark until Dunkirk in France, so along the coast. It was not something like a country or a nation thing. It was more individual settlings, you could say, but it was quite successful. So around 600, the North Sea was often called the Mara Frisia, and that had to do with the fact that the Frisians were good traders and they were good sailors. Religion was not very important, and also central power was not very important, so you do not have heritage in the sense we know it from the rest of Europe as cathedrals or castles. Our biggest heritage, you could say, is in fact the protection of the people against the floods that went over their country all the time. So they built artificial hills. If you experience this city, if you walk through the city, you'll experience that now and then will go up a bit. That is not nature, that is artificial hills. The city is built on 3 artificial hills. It was at the seaside until about 1500. So the people created their own land here, but they didn't do that with central power. They did it very much from a decentral perspective. And that was what we liked to share with Europe in our European Capital of Culture year. We got the title in 2012, 2013, the years that the European crisis, the economical crisis, was at its deepest. And we said the only way to get out of this crisis is that we do not rely on the institutions like government or banks or big companies. We have to rely on the power of the people. So we said we want to organize our Capital of Culture bottom up, and we convinced the jury with that, telling stories like we do not have cathedrals here, but we have the highest amount of churches per square kilometer, to explain how it works. And that concept, that bottom-up concept, has in our own language, you must know the Frisian language is different from the Dutch language. It's the closest cousin to English, although the British don't know. It is not as successful as the English is, you can say, but we in a way, did that differently because we are on average the tallest people of the world. What we did with that concept of bottom-up is organizing a program where we ask the people, what do you think is urgent? What do you think is important? What would you like to present? What do you think tells the story of this region? And then we ask them to connect themselves or ask help to be connected to artists from all over Europe to make an international program. And in fact, that is an approach you do not have often for a culture program. Often it is a cultural director says we are going to do this, that, and that's it. But we organized it bottom up, and we succeeded to do that until the end. One of the powerful figures of our European capital of culture is that 65,000 people, which is about 10% of the population of this region, actively participated in our program. And then is the question, what did they come with? And the interesting thing is then that many projects that the people proposed have to do with our heritage. It has to do with our heritage of the protection against the water. It has to do with the religious heritage. It has to do with the landscape quality and the heritage we have there. And then there is no difference between city and countryside, because people like the stories, the buildings, the landscape tells them. And then the interesting part is that the more you are successful to connect the past to the future, the more successful the projects were. In our region, the concept of 11 cities is very important. We build new fountains in the heart of those 11 cities with artists like Jaume Plenzer and Mark Dion, etc. So high quality art in the center of our heritage. We made a theater plays, a series of theater plays in the churches. People do not go to churches much more in this part of the world. So many churches are not used anymore, or only used once a month or something like that. But we asked the people to collect stories that happened in and around that church, and they told that in theater plays or in exhibitions, etc. And they really enjoyed that. And then that church that was, you can say, shut down, opened up again and became a part in the memory of this year again. We had a group of people that was very much involved with the loss of biodiversity at the countryside, which is a severe problem. The Netherlands is at the lowest list in Europe when it comes to biodiversity. You can say that today the biodiversity in city areas is bigger than in countryside areas. The figures about the loss of bees and insects that we know from Germany, 75% loss, we do not have any reason to think it is different here. And that has to do with the way we organize our life, the chain of agricultural products, etc. And there were people very concerned about that loss of biodiversity, and they started to organize theater plays about the problems of the farmers. They started to organize theater plays about the struggle of Siggo Mansholt, the architect, you can say, of the European agricultural policy, and his struggle when he discovered that his agricultural approach was in fact for nature a disaster. We organized big manifestations to experience the sound of the landscape, and that all together brought us a rich program in which we celebrated the heritage. And then for this conference, I think it is very relevant to share with you that if you do not bring love, if you do not bring children, if you do not bring the stories about life and death into your heritage is nothing more than a dead building. And if your building is death, you have a severe problem. Because people then only can think about your heritage in terms of loss, in terms of a past that was better than the present or the future. So to my opinion, and to contribute to your conference, we should make heritage as vivid as possible, because otherwise it becomes a symbol of those people who like to speak about our heritage as something that was better than the present and the future. In fact, it becomes an instrument for populists, and that is what you shouldn't want. Thank you very much.